Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of the Landlord Page podcast. I'm delighted that on this episode, we're joined with a man who's got double decades of property experience, 20 years in the game, same as me. He's just started his own property business in his hometown with Tadley and Fatcham.
I've always strived to want to do my own thing in agency, and the avocado model definitely has made that, a nice sort of easy path for me to kind of do it by myself. And I just feel that for so many years I've had to be defending the rules and regulations of a company that I personally didn't agree with, which obviously, as you can understand, is very hard.
And he's also worked for corporates, he's worked for independents. So we're also going to get a lay of the land on what it's like working for an estate agency when you're dealing with landlords, property management and everything investing as well. Ollie Hawkins, how are we doing?
Yeah, very good, mate. Thank you. Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Very welcome. Looking forward to picking your brains on a few things.
Sure.
Andy, you've obviously got your background of working with landlords, property management, and I guess estate agency in general.
Yeah.
Kind of what questions would you have for Ollie? You've worked the London market, Ollie's worked the home counties market mainly, but what are the biggest problems at the moment in property management that landlords are facing?
So I think the biggest issues at the moment is not getting the correct advice from people, and landlords trying to steer away from having an agency look after their property and then try and do it themselves. Which I've had discussions with landlords about what they need to do in order to be compliant with their property. Some of the responses I get, I'm devastated because it's just you're going to lose. You're absolutely going to lose. So, those sort of things about is getting the right advice and actually using an agent that can look after your property, and ensure that everything is compliant and done correctly. Now, with a man that's been in lettings for a while, you must have dealt with the same sort of pain points that
absolutely.
I'm sort of talking about. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, to go to your point about landlords and getting the right advice, I've seen it so many times where landlords I've been out to an appointment, I've discussed the basics such as your EPCs, EICRs, gas, and all that really basic stuff. And the amount of times that the landlord tells me, "Oh, the other agent didn't mention that," and then sort of talk to them a little bit further about it, and it turns out that although the company is ALA qualified because a director within the firm is ALA qualified, the actual individual going out to their property has never sat the test, has never gone through any of that, so really doesn't have the base understanding of all of the aspects of rentals that those landlords need to be really informed of. So that's where I think making sure that you're sort of picking and dealing with the right people in the first place, make sure they're ALA registered, because if they're not, whether the company is or the individual is, you've got to be really careful that they're giving you the right advice.
It's an interesting point, because I find the way that conveyancing is these days is very often that you've got a fee earner, you've got a qualified, legal solicitor at the top, who then has a team, and all that fee earner does is just signs documents off. So they almost they can stamp it because the fee earner at the top of the chain is the person that's handling it. It's the same in what you said there in terms of ALA qualification. You've got, you've got a lot of estate agents where the owner or one of the directors is ALA qualified, but the amount of churn and burn you get in estate agency from a staff point of view means that the landlord is never actually dealing with a touch point with someone who is ALA qualified quite often. In the same way with conveyancing, you just deal with the panel, you just deal with the administrators, and no disrespect to them, but they haven't sat 6 years in a university learning the art of law and conveyancing if that's the time on it. So it is a frustration. I totally get your point that as agents, we always want landlords to work with agents to be managed, because we kind of almost say, well, that's the secure way of doing it. But some estate agents are so bad that you can see why landlords would just say, look, sod it, I'll do it myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that you hear a lot more of now, is that I can do a better job myself than dealing with 10 or 11 different people that probably have never seen my property.
Oh, easily. And that's a massive problem that I had in the corporate world was, the amount of times you get a landlord call you up and go, Ollie, you were amazing. Your team finding the property, finding the tenants for my property, getting it all pushed through. And then as soon as it's left your department and gone to the other departments along the way that I've had to deal with, things have absolutely broken down. So a lot of my clients would circle back to me all the time, and I'd have to go and sort of like put out fires, because the departmentalization and frankly, these people in these back office departments, they're not they're not front facing. They never have to look these people in the white of the eyes.
Yeah.
So they just don't really care anywhere as near as much as we do, because I felt accountable to these people because I'm the one who's been out. They've instructed me as their agent, and as soon as it goes to these back office departments, it just, things really do generally tend to they degrade quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think that brings on to the fact that that's the way that the corporate and the traditional estate agency works, and probably the reasons why me and you join someone like Avocado, so we can have that relationship directly with clients.
Yeah,
because we were doing it anyway.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. In a corporate setup.
It makes no difference for me. Yeah.
Let's break it down then. So, if the biggest issue in agency, whether it's sales or lettings, is communication. It has been since we've been in the industry, double decades, and unless something drastically changes, and hopefully it will continue. But if you're a landlord, you've just bought your first buy-to-let, for example, and you're like, right, I now need to put it with, and we won't name names of where you were before, but if we use where you were previously as an example, as an estate agent, the first point of call is probably they're gonna go on the website, they're gonna fill out, I'd like to get my property valued and managed, as an example.
Yeah.
From that point, how many different touch points of people will deal with their property or their tenant, whether they're talking directly or whether they're communicating it? So the first point of call, is that going to be you, or is that going to be a central office?
So initially it was a central office who would sort of, compile all of the sort of valuation leads and then distribute them to the relevant branches, but they'd be the ones that would call them, would book them in. So from that first phone call, wasn't me.
They are qualified?
No.
It's a call centre.
Call centre, absolutely, yeah. So it goes to the call centre speaks to them, books it in, then I go, obviously I'm ILA qualified, so I'm the sort of first touch point of any sort of seriously qualified letting agent. And then at the point that the properties come onto the market, obviously myself and my then team would then obviously work to booking the viewings, obviously get the viewings conducted.
An administrator would probably deal with getting the write-up done.
Yeah, once the tenant's found, it goes to an administration department. We had a specific manager in that regard who managed the file. But you could never guarantee who that was, and again, the quality within that department varied wildly. So at the point that the tenant is then moved into the property, if they're on a managed service, they obviously again go to their property manager. And again, being a large corporate setup with basically big revolving door at the front of the office, lots of different people, lots of changes in property management. When property managers had left, we then got landlords calling going, so-and-so's left. Who am I dealing with now? And I look on the system and, another person is dealing with your file, but they've not been in touch to introduce themselves. Brilliant. Okay, well, let me get that person to contact you, then at the point of, let's say, renewals, there's then a department that deals with the renewals. There's obviously then an accounts department. So if there's any accounting questions, they go to accounts or maybe be referred back to the branch. So along that journey, you've got...
I just counted 9.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Nine as you were going, which is baffling, isn't it? But you can then see... when you look at it from an outside point of view, and we're not looking at it in an agency point of view, or we're looking at landlords or tenants or anything.
Yeah.
There's 9 touch points on, one of the biggest, letting agents in the country there. And that is just a recipe for a communication problem. You ever played the Chinese whispers when you were a kid? In assembly, where you just yellow bananas, and by the end of it, it's like the Green Goblin sucks pumpkins or something like that. It's like, what's happened here? That's what's going on, isn't it? So I can see from a landlord's point of view why they may go, do you know what? I can do a better job myself. The problem we've got with that is if you do go and be an independent landlord and you deal with it yourself, it's a full-time job.
Oh, it's risky as hell.
It's very risky. There's a lot of things you've got to do from a compliance point of view. You're really setting yourself up for the risk factor of a lawsuit from the tenant, because it does fall in the favour of the tenant. That's the fact when it comes to any dispute or, tribunal element of things. Or, even if you're just, like there's a property that we listed together, and when I was going up the stairs, I noticed that there was some gloss down the sides of each step, where someone had painted the glossing of the woodwork, but on every step they'd got gloss on the carpet. Gloss ain't coming off that carpet.
No,
it's not going to happen. Not on that
now.
Colour anyway. Yeah. So I spoke to the landlord, and the landlord said, the tenant, did that, but don't worry, it's going to come out of his deposit. It's not as simple as that.
No, definitely not.
But in that scenario, it feels like it should be that simple. Tenant made an error. They painted the carpet. Don't know why they painted the carpet, but as a result, it should come off the deposit. But
I think years ago, I remember it used to be that you get a gas safety certificate, get the money, get the tenancy agreement signed, move them in.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
And now we're dealing with over 170 pieces of legislation in the lettings industry. So trying to do that yourself, one little hiccup,
massively,
and you're done for. You're screwed. And let's not forget, tenants are becoming more clued up
hugely
nowadays. You see all of this media stuff going out to tenants, and tenants are like, oh, let me just check that. And then realise that, my deposit hasn't been registered within 30 days. I never received any documents. I can claim up to 3 times the amount of deposit. And they'll just sit on that and then bring their tenancy to an end or whatever, and then smash in a claim. So it's crazy. Gone are the days of where, you could just rent a property and deal with it here and there. You have to constantly look at it.
And if you work full time, we've got any other commitments in your life, to have, even one rental is hard enough. If you start then sort of compounding and adding more to that number, you need a qualified agent looking after it all. Because if you were a millionaire who was investing in the stock market, chances are you're going to be getting like a fund manager or someone like that to actually deal with it for you, because they know what they're doing. They're going to be the better people to deal with your money, in very much the same way that we are as qualified letting agents to deal with the rental property. So a lot of people might see us as money for old rope, but with how the legislation is these days, you'd be very silly, should we say, to try and go it alone if you've got absolutely none to little or to very little experience in the field. We're seeing a lot at the moment. What I've seen recently myself is a lot of landlords not being compliant with the right to rent checks, because obviously, as they not a lot of them understand that if their tenants are on an overseas passport and a visa, there are follow-up checks that they may have to do depending on their visa status. All they think is, let's just stick it in file and that'll be it. So that's obviously problems with the government you're going to be creating for yourself. And another thing I've seen a lot of at the moment is landlords unknowingly walking into the realms of HMO, not a licensed HMO, but an unlicensed HMO, which is 3 or more people forming 2 or more households. So they think, we've got a couple and their best mate want to move in. That should be okay. I'm not renting out every room in my house, but actually by they're sort of accidentally falling within that realm, which again, if the local authority catches wind, there can be considerable fines and things for not actually applying the necessary sort of criteria to the property to actually get it compliant for that type of rental.
And I think with just going on to that unlicensed HMO thing, I don't think there's enough information that's gone out about it, and for stuff like that, information doesn't get sent out about it. It's not constant information that's getting fed. That's why people are being caught out about it. So when I was in London, I used to run like a licensing team. The amount of landlords that did not have a clue, what are you talking about? I don't need a license, or it doesn't meet that criteria. Yes, it does. And then you used to explain to them, they were like, God, didn't even know that.
And the other thing as well is that the local authority, there's obviously the main sort of stipulation set by the government, but the local authority had the right to change that to their own will. So so in some cases, in some local authorities nearby, is if you've got two or more people, so if you rent to sharers, then that's a problem. Even if it's 2 friends, 2 colleagues, etc., that can then become a problem for you if they're not a household, i.e., a couple or a family, etc.
Exactly.
Do we think that's why landlords that are selling is massively outstripping landlords buying at the moment, because it's just become a bit of a mess? It's just become a bit difficult.
I think so. I think as we've just alluded to, there's just not enough information out there generally for landlords. A lot that I talk to have very little to no idea. Many of them at the moment aren't your sort of buy-to-let type landlords. They might be your accidentals or those kinds of ones. So again, sometimes you can sort of see the look in their face as you're sort of talking through just the main points, that you need to talk to them about, and they're thinking, right, this sounds a bit difficult, or is this actually going to be for me? But again, 99.9% of the time, again, they instruct us. We push it all through properly. They're protected. We're protected. Tenants are looked after properly. Things just go really nicely. And I think once people, kind of dip their toe and start getting used to what it's like and having that support of an agent that knows what they're talking about, then
when I talk to new property investors, new landlords, more often than not, the first question they've got when they're looking at a property is, will it let? Will I find a tenant? That's their number one kind of concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is the fear of buying a buy-to-let and it being vacant. Yeah. And they just think of their mortgage payment and they think of lack of rent and they think it's going to cost me money. It's an asset which is going to cost me money. It becomes a liability at that stage.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of classic still fear factor that people have. But in reality, finding the tenants like the easiest
bit.
Yeah. So when a landlord then goes, do you know what? I think I'm just going to find myself a tenant on open rent or something like that. You kind of put your head in your hands because you think, well, yeah, but you just find a tenant on Instagram. You find a tenant on TikTok if you want. You find a tenant on Facebook groups. That's not the problem, finding the tenant. Finding the tenant and then finding the right tenant is like step one for us. Is we can find a tenant for any property. That's not a problem.
Of course.
Finding the right tenant from the viewing and just doing a little bit of common sense due diligence. You know, if you're doing a viewing with 10 tenants or you're doing a viewing with 8 tenants or so am I, we're going to get a gut feel of who we would feel comfortable with moving into one of our own properties, and we're going to treat the landlord in the same way.
Definitely.
Whereas when you've got 9 different touch points in a corporate style of letting agency or property management, it's very difficult to have that continuity of, you know, the initial conversation you've had with the landlord. So finding the tenant's the easy part, doing the due diligence on the tenant, making sure the legislation is right, making sure the contract stacks up. All of these little things, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, even 10, 12 years ago, where all of a sudden WH Smith started selling tenancy agreements. And landlords were just like, I'm just buying them for 15 quid from WH Smith. So I was like, what? But, you know, that's how rogue it can actually be. But it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it, you know. So, and then you look at the actual property management aspect of it. And, you know, I sit in the Avocado HQ and hear some of the conversations now between you, Mike, and Pooja talking about, you know, some serious stuff that's getting flagged up, but it's being looked after on behalf of the landlord, and it's being compliant, and it's not a huge chain of command of, you know, different accountants doing this, that, and the other. So that bit of bespoke nurturing for a landlord would probably give a lot of security out there, and hopefully there's more of that unfolds for people. So bringing it round to, you know, where you're at now, Ollie. You're launching your business in Tadley Thatcham. You just felt the time is right now to kind of go, I want to get on Company's House. I want my own bank account. I spoke to someone yesterday that's thinking of doing the same thing, and they said, do you know what? I don't want to argue my agreed bonus at the end of each year that's in black and white that I hit, that for some reason I'm having to debate it at the end of the year. I want my money to be my money. And also I think from a client point of view, if you've been in the job for 20 years, you've probably got a nice set of clients that you look at and think, these are my clients, regardless of who's above the door. So why don't I put my own name above the door? Is that kind of what your feelings was around?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's I've always strived to want to do my own thing in agency, and the avocado model definitely has made that, you know, a nice sort of easy path for me to kind of do it by myself. And I just feel that for so many years I've had to be defending the rules and regulations of a company that I personally didn't agree with, which obviously, as you can understand, is very hard, where you know, in essence, the way that, you know, my pay is structured is based on the company sales targets, so to speak. So you know, again, a lot of my advice has always been the right and correct advice. It's just always the way that I've always wanted to act, and I think I would always treat people as I'd want to be treated. But you know, the sales targets and things like that would always kind of, you know, generally get in the way for a lot of other people in the team, especially the younger negotiators, because at the end of the day, if there's a complaint that's to be made, they're not the ones that are dealing with it. It's the one who's running the branch that's having to look after it. And, you know, having to sort of manage that as well as deal with, you know, clients in a way I didn't really want to deal with them. I know I can do it better. So I think that's now why I'm here, and we're having this conversation, basically.
Culture is such a massive thing in this day and age. I think, you know, the culture of what's around you, you know, a lot of people say you're the average of the 5 closest people around you. And I think that has an impact. But when you look at it professionally, you know, who are the 5 people around you professionally, and what is that culture? And when you're in those offices and you've got, you know, those 5 people, your team, and it's churning and burning all the time, and you know, maybe your area is changing from time to time, or they've got their own KPIs to hit, it becomes really difficult for the client to really get that continuity, I think. And having the ability to kind of work your own clients from start to finish, I'm sure will make a big difference. What's the Tadley Thatcham market like? What's it like for property investors?
Yeah, it's actually really not bad. We've got obviously a huge employer just down on our doorstep, the AWE, the Atomic Weapons Establishment. They bring in a huge.
That sounds scary as shit.
I mean, to be fair, we all glow in the dark. I'm not going to lie, but that's just down the road, which is, I mean, that's been there since I think the 50s, 60s, and it brings in a huge amount of contractors. So from a rental perspective, there's always the need for rental property in Tadley, the nearby sort of Aldermaston, Thatcham. Thatcham's obviously got Vodafone as well. Again, another huge employer. So we're sort of M3, M4 corridor. I mean, literally takes me about 15 minutes either way from Tadley to get to either of those motorways. So it's really nicely sort of located, and there's a lot of investment going into Tadley at the moment. We've had Lidl just open up a new supermarket there, and they wouldn't have put a supermarket there if it was going to be the wrong idea for them. So there's an infrastructure investment. The planning applications are really high in the local area as well. So we're obviously seeing a lot of movement with house building, and and a lot of the reason why myself and my family moved to Tadley in the first place was, versus like a market like Reading, which is basically done to death and is considerably more expensive to buy. A lot of us and our sort of friends have moved out to the Tadley area because it's a really nice, good area, good schools, 15-minute walk from my front door in either direction. I'm basically in the countryside, so it's great for kids going out walks, taking the dog out. We're sort of 15 minutes from Basingstoke, Reading and Newbury. So again, although you've got the sort of amenities of a small town, literally with a stone's throw, you've got everything else you need on your doorstep. So and a lot of people are buying into that area because I think there's a lot of the sort of people. If lockdown's taught us anything, that where you live is important to the sense of the amenities around you. And I think if you're stuck in some parts of Reading which are very overpopulated, they're aesthetically degrading and have over the years, that Tadley's very much the opposite. It's super green, and lots going on. And there's quite an older, a lot of older people live in Tadley as well, because again, they originally would have had their houses through the AWE when they were sort of council houses in inverted commas. And they keep their properties immaculately, so you can drive down most roads in Tadley, and actually it all has a really nice feel about it.
Yeah, I think once you see developers going into an area, and you see Lidl's going into an area, see the corporate companies going in, something's happening in that area. They're not stupid, they're doing it for a reason, because it's an upcoming area. So it's an area that's going to be the place to be.
Definitely.
So if you've got all of that going on,
I mean,
it's an area.
The data that you can get now is scary. We work with a company that can effectively predict people that are most likely to move home, and the way that they do that is because everyone's credit file is now so accessible. They're able to see the people that have had a pay rise, that have just had a child registered. They've got maybe 12 months left on some car finance. They're able to see the cash flow difference that they've got between their outgoings and their incoming, and go, that person's most likely to move because they've got a big void between what they spend. So they're saving cash, they've got good savings, for example. And when you look at the places like Lidl, or cinemas or these complexes, they do that research, and they'll look at somewhere like Tadley, Lidl, and they will say, right, there's money in that economy there, because we can see it, because we've got all the credit checks all done there.
Mad, isn't it?
And as a result, they're going to spend multi-million pounds of money buying the plot, or renting the plot, building the premises, putting the staff in there, doing the stock, and they'll know it will work because they're able to see the touch points, which you couldn't have done 25 years ago, but you can now. So you always know, and we've spoken about it a lot over the last sort of 2 years of doing this podcast, is if the counts are investing and the big boys are investing, the Lidls and the cinema complexes and Waitrose and things like that, if they're putting money in, and then you see the developers getting big planning and hoarding going up, they're doing it for a reason. So if you are a small investor, follow the giants, because they're not doing it in a lot of the big towns anymore. They're doing it in these 15-minute, 20-minute radius locations where they go, right, good school, good affluent area, good connector routes. House prices have gone up well over the last 10 years. There's a lot of money in the economy. Let's put our finger in the water there, basically. So
100%.
That seems like a good a good spot to go and invest. What's a classic kind of 2-bed terrace look like in Tadley from a price point of view?
Something in the region of about sort of 250 to 300, depending on mid, end, semi, garage, etc. But yeah, you've got sort of the smaller 3 beds are knocking around sort of early 300s at the moment. So yeah, those sort of decent 2-bedders are going to be around the sort of 270, 280.
3-bed, 325. What's that going to rent for?
So the smaller 3 beds, you sort of more terrace in the area, about 325, 350, again subject to condition extensions, etc. But something like that in that area is going to rent for good sort of 1,300, 1,400. Sort of the smaller end. But there is, Tadley is generally the home of the 3-bed semi. There's a lot of the ex-local authority, which is exactly what I live in, and those sort of larger plots, the sort of slightly larger 3 beds will generally get around the sort of 1,600 mark. And if you were to buy my house off me today, you're going to be looking sort of circa 400.
Is that an estate agency owner valuation? Or
no, that's I'm not going to lie, that's actually quite conservative. If I was listening, I'd probably put it on for about 425. But yeah, that's the sort of give or take, really. So again, yield wise, it's definitely not unattractive,
and likely to have equity growth as well.
Hugely, yeah.
So I'm an investor looking to buy in Tadley. Where am I putting my money? What's going to get me the best?
I would say that for me, is being closer to the primary schools, because there are some really good primary schools. A lot of these secondary schools are outside of Tadley, so a lot of the kids actually have to get buses to the secondary schools, depending on exactly where you are. So to stay near the primary schools, it's a family market. So you're going to be looking at, say, 2 or 3 bed houses. There are a few apartments in Tadley, but it's not a huge market there, which is actually quite nice. Although I'm sure that more will be going up soon. But yeah, something around that. So I'd say stick to the primary schools, because, with the good ones that are nearby, and there's 3 or 4 of them, you can't really go wrong.
And then stick to your family
sort of properties. Yeah, definitely. If you are a HMO investor, again, it's not potentially a bad location for it, but again, because of the AWE. And the property plots there and sizes do generally lend themselves for extension, and you can, enlarge the property to enable that. And actually, funnily enough, the house that I bought was previously a HMO that was purely just to service the AWE, because again, a lot of the contractors, when they do come, they can be on 6-12 month contracts, and a lot of them don't relocate their families. So so it's also something to keep in mind.
Awesome. Well, Ollie, really appreciate you coming on the episode. It's great to get an idea, and hopefully landlords and future landlords have kind of seen the conversation we've had at the beginning there around probably some of the errors you can make by picking the right or wrong agent, or at the same time, the errors you can make if you decide to go and do it your own or not on your own. And we're not saying no landlord should go and self-manage a property, but if you're going to do it and you're a portfolio landlord, do it as a full-time profession and become a professional in it. Don't do it rogue, is what we're
absolutely.
And then at the second half, it's great to get an idea of your business, how it's going to flow, and Tadley as well. I'm sold. Are you sold?
Yeah, I'm sold.
I'm sold on Tadley.
Didn't know much before, but yeah, I'm going to go and look for a 2-bed terraced house and get invested in it, rent it out.
Yeah. Well, if you are a property investor, you want to talk to Ollie Hawkins and you want him to maybe source you a property or advise in the area, and it's a patch that you think, I've been looking in the Berkshire area, something like that sounds ideal. I call them kind of sandpit type investing areas. Bracknell was that 15 years ago. Everything around it is going up in price, and it's holding low. The sand is inevitably going to fill up that sandpit at some point and level out with the areas around it. So take advantage while it's empty,
100%.
And then you're going to have the equity, in this analogy, the sand falling in and making you money, which is great. So thanks, Ollie.
Thank you very much, lads. Really appreciate being on.
I'm flicking through YouTube and through Spotify. I don't think there's a podcast or a video channel on YouTube that landlords could land on where they're not being sold something.
I mean, it'd be the first time any estate agents ever asked that question, but why not ask that question to a wider audience?
Estate agents have the knowledge there, but they don't seem to share it.
You can do different episodes based around someone that wants an exit plan or someone that's just starting their portfolio.
The rules change every year, but why not just open the floor out and just say, well, is property even the best investment out there?
And tax advice is a big thing, especially with everything that's changed, capital gains tax, and obviously your stamp duty costs that you need to pay and whatnot. People don't realise what they need to prepare for.
We build a podcast and we build a YouTube channel, somewhere that landlords can go and they feel they're not being sold to, but they're just getting quality advice.